Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I'll be chairing today's panel. Joining me on the panel via Zoom is Gail Anderson, and sitting in the meeting room is Mike Colatruglio. Our assessors today are Sharon Tang and Matthew Barocas, and the secretary to our board is Sally Caulfield. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 and 6 on our docket today. Ms. Caulfield, please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name. Please say that again.
You're on mute, Ms. Tang.
Matthew Stephen Barocas.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Madam Assessor, please state your full name.
Sharon Tang.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Madam Applicant, please stand. Please state your full name.
Diane Schindelman.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name.
Justin Zarnowski.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Caulfield. And hello, Ms. Schindelman and Mr. Zarnowski.
Morning.
I just want to confirm before we begin that the item number 1 is an appeal of the supplementary assessment on 1120 Taylor Avenue, and the only point of appeal is assessment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Tang, yes? No other issues at this point?
No.
Okay. All right, then, Ms. Tang, let's start with item number 1, 1120 Taylor Avenue. You may proceed when you're ready.
File number is 23-524. Roll number is 120978099150. Address is 1120 Taylor Avenue. The roll year is 2023. Reference year is April 1st, 2021. The assessed value is 33,500,000. Page 2 of my brief has a description of the property itself. So the property has one building on the land. The building was completed in 2021. There are 124 suites and 124 indoor parking and 102 outdoor parking. Page 3 and 4 of my brief shows the picture of the subject property. No income and expense information was received due to the property was new built. Page 5 of my brief shows the city's valuation. So the potential gross income for the property is $2,608,062. The vacancy rate is 3.2%. The expense ratio is at 38.96% and gives us a net operating income of $1,541,018. And we use a cap rate of 4.6%, which gives us the market value of $33,500,000. Page 6 of my brief shows the comparable for the subject property. The average rent for the property itself is $1,752.73, and the range of my comparables range between $1,695 to $1,799. And page 7 and 8 of my and 9 of my brief shows the cap rate evidence. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Tang. Ms. Schindelman, Mr. Zarnowski, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes. Page 2 of your brief, you said the building was completed in 2021. I don't believe that would be the case.
Oh, I think it just meant the building started to build in 2021. I think it was completed in 2023, July 2023.
Thank you. On page 5 of your brief, I understand, I believe the assessment department was provided with a rent roll for the rents that are occurring in 2023. If I said, I know it's post-reference, so I'm not going to talk about them, but if I suggested to you that the rents you're using in your valuation are higher than the rents in 2023, would you agree with that?
No, I mean, they are post-reference, but we did receive the rents, and the notes would indicate that the individual who put this property on the roll factored those rents back to the reference date. So I wouldn't be able to agree with you with that statement.
Can you explain some of your cap rate evidence? Have you arrived at 4.6%?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so if you'll join me here on page 8, which is the cap rate evidence. So what these are, these, as the 2 paragraphs on the top indicate, these are just examples of some sales that took place within the relevant period we're looking at. So you can see the sale dates. They precede April 1st, 2021. We've got the breakdown of some of the physical metrics. And what was done here in the last column says cap rate. What we have is we get the income and expense mailers from property owners as per the request we put out every year. And we'll take a multi-year stabilized income approach to come up with a stabilized net operating income. And then you apply that in tandem with the sale price as registered at land titles to come up with a cap rate. So for this property, this is a newer property. The cap rate sale that would pertain to this property would be the first one, 2390 McPhillips. And that was calculated at 4.71 based on a 3-year stabilized net operating income. So we were at 4.6. 2390 McPhillips is we do have some rebuttal, and you will see the figures, and we'll also see how that particular property is in an inferior location compared to Taylor. So we have that one at 4.7. We're at 4.6 at Taylor. It makes sense to us not to have enough evidence to make a change on the cap rate.
So you're saying that the cap rate's generated not on actual net operating income, but off of some adjustment that you make?
No, it's the cap rate is assigned by the model. The model cap rate calculations are generated by sales data in tandem with the income and expense information we respectively receive from those properties that have sold within the city of Winnipeg during the relevant reference period.
Sorry, let's try that again. It's not based on the net operating income in the year it was sold.
It's based on that year and also the preceding years, because an investor leading up to buying the property, in order, an appraiser, what they would do is they wouldn't look at just 1 year, they'd look at the historical income and expenses and then stabilize them with a stabilized effective gross income and expenses. They'd come up with a stabilized NOI. So that's how the cap rate column on the far right on page 8, that's how those figures were generated.
So this cap rate isn't the typical net operating income as a ratio of this of the sale price. So cap rate typically is you're taking the sale price, how many times, what percentage the net income deals with that sale price. That's how you get cap rate. When you say cap rate here, you don't mean that. You're not taking net operating income and dividing it by the sale price.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing.
But you just said you didn't do that. So it
No,
sells in 2020. You're not taking the 2020 net operating income and dividing it by the sale price. Mm-hmm. You're doing some adjustment to it to come to this cap rate.
If you can hang on about 25 minutes, you're going to see all the calculations in the rebuttal that'll probably answer all your questions.
Well, my question is, you didn't take the net operating income from the year it sold and put that into the sale price to come to cap rate. This is adjusted.
Right? Yeah, this is far more accurate. I used the year prior to the sale, and then I used the 2 years prior to that and came up with a stabilized net operating income. That's how appraisal works.
Well, that's not what a cap rate is. So what you're saying is you instead of doing a typical cap rate analysis, you did something different, right?
No, I did the typical cap rate analysis. You're talking about something different.
Okay, the points have been made. There's a disagreement on what the approach means, but I think we all understand. Mr. Brokus did a stabilized NOI and came up with a cap rate and not just 1 year of a cap rate. So, okay, proceed, Ms. Schindelman and Mr. Zarnowski.
So on page 7, you've got this, table of cap rates. And so specifically, this is multifamily. Could you explain what high rise, low rise A and low rise B mean?
We don't have those definitions in our evidence.
You do have the definitions in your evidence?
No, we don't. So I was not given a definition for this. High rise typically means above 6 stories or above. Between low rise A and low rise B, I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure. but they
Okay, so would you call this property a high rise, low rise A, low rise B?
I would think it's a low rise. If you look at the cap rate ranges, or it's 6 stories. Oh, well, I mean, if you look at the cap rate ranges assigned by the city of Winnipeg 20th to 80th percentile, they're the same. But I would probably call this, if it's a 6-story, it's like it's on the edge between high and low rise. So
Okay,
kind of a judgment.
I don't think it matters that much. So if you look at the Collier's low, in your evidence, you say it's a 5 cap, right?
That's what Collier says.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is your evidence. And CBRE says it's a 5 cap. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Cushman and Wakefield, I mean, you can say it's on the edge. If it's a high rise, they say the lowest is 475 and low rise would be 5 cap, right?
That's what the chart says, yeah.
Okay. Take back the reins again.
So then you arrived at the cap rate by looking at one other building. Is that what you're telling me as well? Telling us as well?
No, the cap rate was assigned by the model. And 2390 McPhillips is an example. It just serves as an example as market evidence of how cap rates do exist in that range.
And then the 2, 4, 5 other examples in your brief. Would you agree that they're not at all comparable to the subject?
Yes, I wouldn't consider them when coming up with the evidence for a cap rate of this property. I would agree with that.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Thank you. In regards to the assessment, can you confirm, is this all model driven or were there any adjustments made?
It's all model driven.
Okay. And also confirm the date of the addition to the roll. What is the effective date?
You meant the exact date or?
No, the month.
Oh, it was July 2023.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Colatruglio, do you have any questions?
A couple. As far as the sales, obviously we have one newer property of 4 stories. And as pointed out by Ms. Shinneman, the other properties are much older and much smaller in terms of height. Is there any other sales that took place during the reference period that you can draw to, or is this what you're stuck with?
Yeah, this is the one that we're stuck with. We've been discussing throughout the season. So we'd love for there to be more, but there just isn't.
Fair enough. And in the stabilization that you did with the calculation of these cap rates, is that typical in the marketplace to do those types of things?
Yes.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just like to go back to your page 6, please. This is your page dealing with rents. So you have 4 comparable properties. There's quite a different mix in the suite mix. There's quite a different range there. In our subject, there's 74 1-bedrooms and 52 bedrooms. But in comp 1, there's 4 bedrooms or 4 1-bedrooms and 46 2-bedrooms. Do you feel that's a comparable? Do you feel that's a reasonable comparable with such a different suite mix? And which of these do you think we should be looking at as the most relevant?
I think comparable 4 is the most comparable compared to the subject property in terms of the suite mix. It has 98 one-bedroom and 35 two-bedrooms.
Okay. And okay, so these other ones you wouldn't see is something we should be looking at, or, and if so, why are they here?
I think the other ones is more for a reference. It's just there to show that the rent is within this range. And the subject property is within the range of the other comparables that within the city and also in the area, but we just focus more on the 835 Sterling Loin Parkway, which is more similar to the subject property in terms of suite mix.
Okay, so just a quick question on comparable number 1. Would you expect a property with a preponderance of 2-bedroom apartments to have a higher average monthly rent than one with a preponderance of single family? Like, I'm just questioning the relevance of even bringing it forward.
So yeah, I mean, if everything else was the same, yes, this one is the newest one as well, though, with construction being completed in 2023. So like a vehicle, the new car is always going to sell for more than the older one.
Yeah, okay. Okay, you did indicate that the property was completed in July 2023. Is that when it was added to the roll?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, let's see, what else should I have? Everything else is model, right, from vacancy rate to expense ratio.
That's correct.
And would that vacancy rate reflect normal vacancy rate for a new build?
I would say so, yes.
Can you explain why?
Well, these are the rates are generated by the model. The model is driven by the income and expenses that we receive from the property owners. Buildings do lease up. They don't become completed and immediately have market occupancy. But anyone with a 30 million plus investment isn't going to sell their property on the open market at a reduced cost based on a short-term lease up vacancy. A lot of these places, they either pre-lease or they fill up in like 6 months. So on an overall valuation standpoint, we don't consider elevating the vacancy at the onset.
Okay. All right, I have no additional questions.
You mind if I ask one more question?
Yes, of course.
Sure. In terms of the occupancy currently, are you aware of what that is now? Is it leased up?
I think based on the rent roll that was provided to us, it is leased up as of the time that the rent roll was provided to us. We're not too sure. I guess it is fully leased right now.
The applicant could probably answer that question better than we can. If something's changed since we got the rent roll.
I'm just wondering if you were aware of that, just as a point of interest at that point.
Thank you. Ms. Schindelman and Mr. Zarnowski, when you're ready with your presentation, please.
We have some rebuttal as well.
Okay, so we'll deal with your main presentation and then we'll go to your rebuttal and then we'll go to the assessor's rebuttal.
Okay. Okay, page 1. Just confirming this building is 6 floors, multi-unit residential located in Grant Park area. Construction was completed in 2023. The building is located on Taylor Avenue. It's a commercial street, mostly businesses on the street with right on the property, several hydro easements and high voltage hydro transmission towers. Views from the property include the CN main line where there's 40 to 50 trains per day, the hydro substation and Walmart. Traffic is busy along Taylor Avenue with counts of 25,900 vehicles per day. Page 2. Because this building didn't exist in 2021, we had to estimate the rents based on other market rents for similar properties, as well as taking the actual rents charged in 2023 and forecasting them. I guess forecasting is not the right word, but going back 2 years, and we arrived at rents of $2,333,268. The actual rents in 2023 are $16.96 per unit, and so we would expect that in 2021 they wouldn't be that high, because typically rents don't decrease from 21 to 23, they would increase. So we would suspect that in 2021 the rents would be lower than in 2023. Vacancy at 4%, which is within the market, which I have evidence showing that amount. Operating costs of 38.96, which we've used in accordance with the model-driven amount that does work in line with where we see expenses. Capitalization rate at 5%, which again is within the market capitalization rates based on various reports from other the companies that do the cap rate analysis, and it does fall within the City of Winnipeg cap rate report as well. We've arrived at an estimated market value of $29,497,200. Page 3, 4, and 5 is the adjusted rent roll to 2021. I've also included the rents per square foot per month because it seems nowadays that apartments, there's very tiny ones, there's larger ones, they're all different sizes. So we've also looked at the rents per square foot per month just to make sure we're in line. How we arrived at the 2021 rent analysis is by taking the actual 2023 and discounting them back by 4% per year, which is well within the range that we would be able to increase from 21 to 23. Page 6 is our rent comparable. We have some of the same comps. 300 Assiniboine is located on the river, basically on Assiniboine Avenue. The rents for that building are between $1.65 and $1.70 per square foot, and the amenities within the building are similar, except for they also have a pool in this building, and it's located downtown on a park on the river, near all the fun places that the city has to offer downtown. We would consider this building the most comparable to the subject. As reference, we've also included other new buildings as well that maybe aren't as comparable. We don't suggest that 835 Sterling Lion is as comparable. It has a large number of amenities that are not in the subject, and it is a much higher end property with finishes that are higher end, more expensive, more costly than the subject property. I'll go over those. Excuse me. Some of the things that they have that is not of the subject is a car wash, a pet wash, various barbecue areas on the grounds, and elevators that go directly into suites. They also have suites that rent for around $4,000 a month, well above what's in the subject property. 800 Dover Court is in a similar location. And 100 Paja, One Evergreen Place, it's an older building, but it's also similar in what it has to offer. Same with Wellington Arms, 7 Evergreen, and Canterbury House. The reason we feel that 300 Assiniboine is comparable, it was built right around the same as the subject. It does have, as I mentioned, some better, nicer amenities. The rents per unit are higher because their suites are larger. It has walking distance to downtown and the Forks, and all of this is desirable to empty nesters and young professionals, the most common renters of new buildings, new multifamily suites. 835 Sterling Lion, like I said, has more expensive cabinetry, millwork, and appliance packages, car wash, pet wash, dog run, community fire pits, private elevator for certain units. And as I said before, some units rent for over $4,000 a month. To reconcile the rents per square foot per month, we would exclude the highest and lowest rents. 835 Sterling Lion and 100 Paget would be excluded, and that gives a range of rents per square foot for 1 bedrooms of $1.46 to $2 per square foot, and for 2 bedrooms, $1.48 to $1.70 per square foot. And the rents used in this valuation fall well within this range. And in fact, some rents used are higher for 2-bedroom units in this valuation. Page 8, we have the CMHC 2021 Manitoba rental market highlights. It indicates rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Winnipeg is $1,317. The rents in this valuation are much higher than this. Clearly, this number includes all apartments. So I mean, it would be include new and old and everything. So we understand that the rents of the subject would be somewhat higher. Page 9, I've highlighted the vacancy rate for especially for new apartments. We noticed that there's an increase in supply, so vacancy rates have been coming up. And the purpose-built apartment vacancy rate increased to 5% in 2021 relative to 3.8% in 2020. So significant new additions to purpose-built rental universe has helped increase this vacancy rate, and we've all seen it. We've all seen the supply of new apartments in the city. Page 10. It shows that in the area, the subject area, Assiniboine Park, is right around the 5% mark for vacancy. We've used 4% in this analysis. At page 5, I've already addressed the vacancy analysis and the expense analysis. Capitalization rate. Capitalization rates in the city of Winnipeg 2023 general parameters for multi-residential are in the 4.8 to 5.6 range for the 80th percentile. We have used 5% for this new property that did not exist in 21. There is no history of occupancy or operating costs, so the risk of the unknown is high. Further risk increases from the proximity to Manitoba hydro easements and high voltage transmission towers. The city of Winnipeg does not currently have any mitigation standards for housing located within this proximity to transmission lines, but potential regulatory change presents additional risk at this site. Location risk also occurs at this site when comparing to other residential locations. As outlined above in this brief, 300 Assiniboine is situated in a lush green area adjacent to a large park, walking distance to some of the most visited sites, offices, and businesses in Winnipeg. The subject is located on a busy street in a commercial location. This property is CMHC insured. The requirements of CMHC insurance create significant financial risk for this property in the market when comparing to other properties. The subject property has 5 one-bedroom units that have deeply discounted rents of $1,012 per month in 2023. 936 if we discount it back to 2021. Under the CMHC guideline, the landlord is not allowed to increase these rents more than CPI for 10 years. So the landlord does not have the freedom to raise rents as normal for new construction. This creates a big risk compared to other multi-residential buildings that don't have this requirement. Not only it decreases the value in the market for the subject. It does decrease the value in the market for the subject for potential buyers. This requirement not only applies to 5 discounted suites, but for all the rents in the unit. So again, the landlord cannot increase rents, doesn't have the freedom to increase rents like other landlords that have a new building without this insurance. Buildings which sell in the market are generally on a free and clear basis, meaning the buyer has the opportunity to determine the appropriate financing for new buildings, the market rent. That opportunity does not exist for this property. It is bound by the rules of CMHC. The following properties are sold in and around the reference year. These are the cap rate comparables that we were able to find. I'm not sure why the city cannot find these ones. They are available in the market. 703 St. Anne's Road, built in 2021. Sale price of $9 million, cap rate of 5.27. 2390 McPhillips, built in 2015, sold in 2020. Sale price $19,400,000. The cap rate was 5%. The income in 2019, which is what the cap rate would normally be based on, the 1 year prior income of the sale year was $970,000, and that equates to a cap rate of 5%, which is how cap rates, in my experience in this industry, are calculated based on the 1 year prior. Southview Crescent, I was not privy to the exact address, but it was a newer building built in 2015, sold in 2016 for $38 million, which would suggest it, given the sale price, should be probably a similar size, with a 5.25 cap rate. Again, Ward Avenue, I was not privy to the exact address, a little bit older, sold in 2016 with a 5.2 cap rate. And once again, we had cap rate evidence for a portfolio that was sold in 2017. I do have some verbiage from, I received these 3 cap rate comparables from an appraisal office, and I have some evidence that Southview Crescent is a notable multifamily transaction of 148 townhouse units that were constructed approximately 4 years ago. The portfolio transaction comprised of newer apartment buildings similar in size, age, and quality, and condition to our subject property. We also have the evidence from the 3 organizations that do cap rate studies. Collier's High Rise 5% to 6%, CBRE High Rise B, there was no rate for High Rise A, 5% to 550, and Cushman High Rise 450 to 550. 5% cap rate fairly represents the risks associated with this property. Accordingly, this valuation is 5%, which is on the lower side of the ranges of the market reports and well within the city of Winnipeg parameters, as well as the sale comparables noted above. We respectfully submit the market value of the subject property at April 1, 2021 was $29,497,200, rounded to $29,497,000. Just to confirm, I just wanted to say one more thing. The rents per square foot that we calculated were based on the actual unit, not the unit plus the balcony. Just to confirm, it's on the actual unit. I believe that is all of my evidence, our evidence.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tang, Mr. Barocas, do you have any questions for the applicants?
Yeah, just a couple. So for, you look at the rent roll starting on page 3, you had indicated that there are 4 units where the rent was significantly reduced because of CMHC considerations. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay, so now, do those
5, I
considerations,
think. Sorry, did you say 4? I think 5 units.
uh, is it 4 or 5? I think I said 4.
It's 5, one on every floor other than the main floor.
Okay, so now that agreement with CMHC, that was part of the current owner's deal to get financing to purchase the property. Would that be fair to say?
Well, to build it, so we've owned it for a long time.
Yeah, okay. Okay, sounds good. Now, that consideration, does it not run with the builder and now owner and not, would that be a deal that's particular to you guys as the owner and a purchaser would not be held to that? Because they wouldn't be dealing with CMHC?
If you were buying this, you'd buy the mortgage, because there's significant premiums that come with, so if you were trying to get the best price for this property, you'd sell it and they'd assume the mortgage. That would be, otherwise, they'd have to reapply for CMHC financing. So typically apartments have CMHC, or clear title. So if somebody was buying this, they'd be buying it subject to this mortgage, or they'd be paying less.
Okay, so they would, so that you're saying this, the financing deal that you guys have with CMHC, that runs with the property now. That's something that can't be
But
separated from.
it could be, if you pay off a mortgage, they take it off the title. But if somebody was, like, if you were saying, what would be the highest value for this property, it would be buying it subject to this mortgage.
Okay. All right, so just your, where is this? I think it's the cap rates on page 13. So 703 St. Anne's, is that a sale that went through land titles?
Don't they all go through land title? I don't know.
You can buy the shares.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a cap rate that we collected.
Mhm. Yeah, fair enough. Sometimes they're shares. I'm just wondering, I haven't seen that one before. I'm familiar with the other 3. And 2390 McPhillips, we'll be talking about. For Southview, Southview physically, it's kind of like the townhouse development. Would you agree that it's more of a series of like attached single family dwellings insofar that like they all have their own garages? Would that be fair to say?
You know, I'm not that familiar with this property.
Okay.
It wouldn't, the people that I got the cap rate from wouldn't give me the exact address, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think it's 100 Southview. Anyway, it's been in our cap rate study before. And then Ward, that's an older sale, and that's an older building, 2006. Okay. You know what? I think that those are our questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schindelman and Mr. Zarnowski, you indicated that you have rebuttal evidence.
Do you ask us questions on this first? Just
Oh, yes. Oh, of course. Yeah, kind of forgot that step, didn't I? Okay, Mr. Colatruglia, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I was just gonna ask couple of questions, if you don't mind. So you've used a 4% adjustment to the rents to come up with the valuation of the NOI for this property, correct?
Yes,
And you say that's market driven, you thinking?
yes,
Okay. And as far as I think we touched on it just briefly there, the 5 units that are lower rents, they're smaller units within the building, and those are requirements to the mortgage that was taken out with or through.
for the
CMHC.
insurance, for the
Okay.
CMHC insurance.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So obviously you had built that into the requirement of the building and still built the building based on the fact that you could probably make a go of it based on everything else that was going on there.
Sure.
Excellent. I guess moving on to cap rates, you mentioned, and what I'm kind of interested by this, that you are looking as a potential buyer, when you look at a cap rate or a property and a cap rate for that property, you would only look at 1 year's worth of income and expenses?
I mean, I'm sure they're gonna look at other years too, if there was a crazy swing, but to calculate the cap rate, you take the income for the prior year, because you're in the middle of a year. You take the income and then you divide it by the sale price, and you get the cap rate.
Yep,
I
sure
mean,
enough.
we fill out the revenue and expense questionnaires, or the sale questionnaires, and it says, what was the cap rate? Well, I don't take 5 years of income and adjust it and then go, okay, then the cap rate was
Yeah,
5%.
I'm not sure that the assessor's taking 5 years, but
Well, 3 years, he said three, whatever.
and so wouldn't that be a typical investor looking at that to see how normal that income stream is at that point?
I would say we don't actually, when we do investment analysis, we don't use cap rate at all.
You're looking at it from the perspective of,
It depends, per square foot, is a benchmark we use typically, because we think that we can do better. And then, but yeah, when we do, and or IRR, so we're analyzing, like, we're forecasting rents forward, and so that internal rate of return would be the sort of the gold standard for our investment analysis. I don't think anyone, if you said to our office, what cap rate do you need to buy something, you'd get puzzled looks. Like, that's just not what we do.
fair enough, but it is part of the equation, obviously, so.
Yeah, we have to do it here.
Fair enough. And then Justin's, I think we had one question answered regarding the cap rates that you are referring to on your page 14, if I'm not mistaken. You had said that you had received some of these cap rates from an external entity, not from in your company at this point.
We got them from an appraisal.
Fair enough. And you had mentioned one particular one, which is the portfolio, that is made up of several buildings, I'm guessing.
Yes,
Do you know which buildings those are?
I do not. They would not share that with me.
Okay.
Again, this is evidence of things that happened in and around the sale date that are similar in year build and similar, size. I would imagine they're similar size based on the values and that sort of thing, as opposed to.
But we've already heard that the Southview Crescent property is markedly different in terms of what it is as opposed to.
It looks different, yeah.
So wouldn't be necessarily comparable at that point. Single family attached type of units as opposed to an apartment block. Different animals.
Right.
Fair enough. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question in regards to the rents that you referred to on page 12, the limitations placed on the rents by CMHC insurance. So just wondering, in regards to the limitation, and it applies to all the apartments you indicated, is there any opportunity within that 10 years, if there was a major capital maintenance project required, that an application could be made to increase the rents beyond the percentage of CPI?
I don't think there is. CMHC is very specific and very strict in their rules. I have this big long explanation of the 10%. So.
And remember, this product is to encourage new housing. And so the likelihood of a significant capital expense in the first 10 years after a new build, I mean, you'd hope Precon would fix it. Who built it. But so you could see why that wouldn't be something that would be built in. So I don't think we're aware of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have the definition and it's basically what I have right in my brief. It's subject to this 10% reduction and that we cannot increase higher than CPI for the 10 years. There is no, it doesn't talk about what you referred to.
Okay, so there's no opportunity to make an application to vary that in any way within the 10 years. And it applies to all the apartments, correct?
It does.
Okay, thank you very much. And my other question is the occupation, is everything fully occupied now and as of when?
It is not fully occupied now. We have some vacancy.
Okay, what's the percentage of vacancy right now?
I haven't looked at it lately.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you. I do not have additional questions. So we'll deal with the rebuttal evidence. Ms. Caulfield, do we have the rebuttal evidence?
All rebuttal evidence has been electronically distributed.
Okay, thank you. So give us a minute.
You should have just now, like
Just
within
now.
the last 20 minutes.
Sally, that's under August apartment cap rate?
No,
Oh.
it's item number 1. I have it as the 4th item in item number 1.
Oh, sorry, here we are.
No. You know what? Close this. for a second.
Listed as rebuttal.
Yeah.
Minimized it.
Such a bad point.
Okay, let's look at it again.
I can close.
Item 1, there's this rebuttal and the applicant's rebuttal. So those are the two.
Yep, no worries.
rebuttal
Got it. I'm on it. Sorry.
Okay, no worries.
My apologies.
We just had to refresh it.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I think we all have it now. So Ms. Schindelman, Mr. Zarnowski, you can speak to your rebuttal, please.
Okay, 1 second. You're not doing it.
Yeah.
It's fine. Okay, sorry about that. Page 1, we just wanted to talk about the differences between the subject and the assessment department's comparables. 1845 Gateway. This is a life lease, includes water, heat, and electricity. The benefits of a life lease include a community of like-minded people, usually 55 plus, and committed to staying in the property for life. Turnover would typically be less than in a conventional rental arrangement, and accordingly, costs of turnover would be less as well. This property boasts of the following additional amenities not available to the subject: a fully outfitted woodworking room, a guest suite, sunroom, gazebo, and garden. These units are much larger than the subject as well. 70 buys and drive units are much larger than the subject. Amenities, various lounge areas, including a ping pong room. 130 Sage Creek is a 55 plus community with similar benefits of tenants committed to staying in the property for life. A guest suite, a lush developed residential community with expansive green space and adjacent walking trails. 835 Sterling Lion Parkway, high-end finishes and suites, and in the building with some units having private elevators to the unit, on-site concierge, outdoor fire pits, pet wash station, and car wash station. The last point is the 2390 McPhillips. Again, we've already talked about this over and over. The evidence we received from Cushman Stevenson is 970,000 divided by 19,400,000 equals 5% cap rate. Number 2 is just the gentleman from Stevenson providing that information. And page 3 is not really important at this point. It was just pictures of some of the assessment department comps, which I thought were clearly not comparable either. But they weren't referring so much to these ones, but did include them in the brief. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schindelman. Ms. Tang, Mr. Brokus, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence only, please?
Yeah, just if we go to page 2, that email. So the information that you received, as far as you know, is that the 2019 year end net operating income was 970,000 even. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what this gentleman says.
Was there a income and expense form attached to this email that you're able to verify this
No.
figure?
No,
No? Okay. And so when I take that nine,
they wouldn't provide that to us. I mean, that would be, I'm sure that
Okay.
would be private information for them.
okay. And so it's just when you put 970,000 over 19,400,000, that comes up to 5% cap rate, like even, with no decimals at all. Did you find that somewhat as an anomaly? I don't know what word to say that.
I don't know. I mean, I would imagine that appraisers have a code of ethics. I don't think that they would present information that is not correct in their minds. So I accepted it. We hire appraisers all the time. We hope that they're doing everything right too, so.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions on the rebuttal?
No, I have no questions on the rebuttal, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Colatruglio, do you have any questions on the rebuttal?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, and neither do I. So Ms. Tang, Mr. Brokus, I understand you also have rebuttal. Let's just get to that. That's just the one page on 2390 McPhillips, is that correct?
It's not one page. There's
Oh.
there's
Oh,
the
it's 9 pages, but
Yeah.
that's the cover page. Got it.
I'm not going to go through everything on it, but
Okay. Okay,
Spare
but it
everybody.
starts with the first page is 2390 McPhillips, 4.71 cap rate.
for sure. Okay.
Okay.
So this is what I did. Is we have the income and expense information. So used everything they gave us. Used 3 years. We've got we got the average column, we got the stabilized column, decisions that were made on the right, be it the most recent year, and whether it's the average based on the particular row. I'm sure you guys have seen this sort of thing before with Altus. And so what it was, it generated a net operating income of 913,395 stabilized, which generates a 4.71 cap. You can see 2019. If you look at the net operating income that we received, it says 924,120. It's a lot different than the 970 that the information that Shiniko was provided. So I did include the mailers as well. But we'll go to page 2 just to show the location of this property as it pertains to kind of like what's around Taylor. So this property is McPhillips north of Leela. It's got the Walmart to the west. It's got car dealerships surrounding it in commercial development. So I wouldn't describe it as the most ideal location. And it's still cranking out a 4.71 cap on a 3-year stabilized, because there's always slight variation year to year in terms of expenses fluctuation. So that's why we use more than one to try and get a better idea what's going on, and where applicable, like for utilities, where the most recent rate is the most reflective, going forward, we use that. So the page 3 is just another picture. And then page 4 and 5, that's the 2019 income statement. And if you go down to the bottom of page 5, net income 924,119. That's what we have as well for 2019. So our stabilized net operating income is pretty close to the most recent year. So I'm not sure where 970 came from. The remainder of my rebuttal is just the income and expense mailers that they provided for 18 and 17. So you could verify my work after if you want to do that. So that's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Ms. Schindelman, Mr. Zarnowski, do you have any questions on the assessor's rebuttal evidence?
We do. So you say this is stabilized, and I'm looking at the 3 years of expense ratio that you used. So 2017 is 35.78.
Yep.
Okay, so 2018 is 35.06.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2019 is 36.73.
Mm-hmm.
So then you said the average of that is 35.85.
That's what they, based on what they reported, yep.
Okay, and then you stabilized it to a higher number than any of that, to 37.46, right?
That's what was done, yeah.
Oh, okay, and so having a higher expense ratio would lower the NOI, right?
That would push the NOI down. So yeah, a lower NOI over a static sale price would generate a lower cap rate from a mathematical standpoint, yeah.
So this stabilized number results in a lower cap rate than the actuals, whether they're averaged or whether you pick 2019, 2018, 2017.
Well, I mean, I did a little calculation that if you use 2019, 924,120, and you divide it by the 19,400,000, that generates 4.76. So 471, 476. It's pretty close.
Okay, and so looking on your page 2, you've got the location here. Are there any the lattice towers for transmission lines at this property?
No, there is not.
There a railway track somewhere here?
No.
Okay. Any questions, Diane?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Coulatruglio, do you have any questions on the assessor's rebuttal evidence?
Just wanted to clarify that cap rate that you had calculated on the actual 2019 at 4.76%.
Yeah, if I was to look at just 2019, which I wouldn't, it would be 476.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Ms. Tang, Mr. Brokus, would you desire summation?
I think it's been pretty much discussed at this point, so just leave it with you guys.
Okay. Ms. Schindelman, Mr. Zarnowski, summation?
I think we just be repeating ourselves, so we'll save you from that.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. This concludes our hearing of item number 1 on the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Caulfield, perhaps we can just take a 5-minute recess while everybody gets organized, and then we'll move to item number 6. But if we could recess for 5 minutes, that would be great. I'd like to call our meeting back to order. We are resuming our hearing, starting with item number 6 on our agenda, which is 125 Miragate. Can somebody provide spelling or pronunciation?
I believe it's Marigate.
Mirrigate, thank you. Okay, so I just want to confirm that this is an appeal of the 2023 supplementary assessment, and assessment is the only issue we are dealing with. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you. All right, then, Ms. Chang, Mr. Brokus, you may begin, please.
One moment, please, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, we need
May I
to swear
affirm
in.
the applicant?
You bet.
Thank you. Please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Madam Chair.
Caulfield. Thank you, Ms. Caulfield and Mr. Navarro. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Tang and Mr. Brokus.
File number is 23-516. Roll number is 0500942990. Address is 125 Mirrigate. The assessed value for 2023 is $38,040,000. Page 2 of my brief shows information for the property. So there are 5 buildings on the property. They range between 2 stories to 4 stories. The building started to looks like the building was completed in 2022. There are 161 suites, 44 indoor parking, and 161 outdoor parking. Page 3 and 4 of my brief shows the interior picture of the property itself. And page 4 and 5 shows the valuation of the property based on the city's model. So the average monthly rent based on the model is $1,593. The potential rent is $3,078,893, and we use 4.2% vacancy, 38.74% of the expense ratio, and that gives us $1,806,912. And we use a 4.75% cap rate, and that gives us a $38,040,000. And page 6 of my brief shows the comparable for the subject property. I understand that the suite mix was not the best, but I was focusing more on the price per square foot. So if we look at the, I guess the row from row 5 and row 4 and row 5 from the bottom, we can see that the gross floor area per unit and the average monthly rent and the range and the price per square foot for the subject property is $1.37, and my comparable ranges between $1.31 to $1.41. And page 13 of my brief shows the brochure for the property itself, and it also shows some pictures and the amenities that was provided for the property itself. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Chang. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
I do, Madam Chair. Ms. Tang, were you at this location at any time?
No.
Okay, so the pictures that you have on page 3 and 4, are those taken from a website?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And you indicated that the building was constructed or finished in 2022. Do you know if that was late 2022, early 2022, or mid 2022?
I don't have the exact information.
Okay. Going to your page number 6, you indicated that the rent per square foot that you calculated for the subject was exact. Can you repeat it?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
What was the rent per square foot that you had calculated?
Oh, is $1.37?
Okay, $1.37 per square foot. Okay. And that is based on the total gross floor area, not on the actual mix of units, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so it includes common areas and any other areas, correct?
I would assume, yes.
Okay. Okay, next question is, these locations are in different market regions, are they not?
That is correct. Yeah, the property itself is fairly new, so there are not that many comparables for the subject property. I think they're still developing the Aurora area, which is in the North Point area. So they don't have many comparables, rent comparables.
Okay. And are any of these 55 plus these comparisons 1 through 4?
I'm not sure.
Is 130 Sage Creek possibly 55 plus?
I don't have that information.
Okay, thank you. The next question relates to the rent of the subject, and I'll ask you to go back to your page 5. Actually, page 4. Your gross is $3,078,893. Now, is that a modeled rent, or has that rent actually been taken from actuals that have been factored back?
It's a modeled rent, but the rent is set in the model in consideration by looking at the actual income and expenses that we received. So we have different like settings we could set the rent at, like excellent, good, average, based on, you know, amenities and whatnot. So it's kind of like a tandem, but the overall rent is taken from it is model generated.
Okay, so what you're saying to me is that this is a modeled rent and you're not actually using the actuals in consideration of this rent?
We consider it, but ultimately the model generates the final figure.
The model generates the final figure. Okay. Can you explain what that means, though? You consider the actuals?
Yeah, sure. So what that means is, so we get the rent roll. The rent rolls post reference. We can't use it to set the assessment. So what that means is our model, it's like we don't just like punch it in and then based on the physical characteristics it spits out a rent. What it does is there's different income qualities we can set it at based on the physical characteristics, desire by potential tenants, what buildings or other new buildings are renting for. So there's different brackets. There's like excellent, good, average. And so based on the model will assign different rents based on what the assessor populates that field at. Now, in order to make that determination, they look at the actual rents. So while the number is model generated, consideration towards the actuals are paid.
Okay, so in other words, you have paid some attention to the actuals in this case.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sally, I will be providing some rebuttal to that, and that will be the document noted as rebuttal afterwards. Not the other one that says rebuttal of assessor capitalization rate, the one that just says rebuttal.
Applicant rebuttal. All right.
Okay. Okay, going back to your page 6, these comparisons again, can you elaborate as to why you would have not chosen any comparisons from the actual area of the subject?
I think like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the area is fairly new. We don't really we can't find any comparables within the area. That's why I went out of the area to find the comparables.
Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of your capitalization rate information, this is just the standard chart that's provided with every City of Winnipeg appeal brief.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, this is a low rise. You'll confirm that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, going by the three examples here of brokerage firms, Colliers, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, low rise A only shows 5.25 to 5.75, and then low rise on the Colliers goes from 5 to 6 and 5 to 5.75. So is it clear that the brokerage firms are saying that the border, the low border on cap rates is 5%?
I wouldn't say that's exactly the border. I think it has to do with methodology. I mean, I've sat across from Colliers here before, and I've seen their cap rate report and the methodology they use. If you look at the methodology that's indicated in their evidence, in the cap rate, in the Colliers cap rate report itself, what they say they do is they take the net operating income actually the year after the property was sold and base it on the sale price. So they don't use the information beforehand like we look at. Like, I know Altus, when I've seen Altus's cap rate study, that's what you guys look at and consider. So I wouldn't put stock in what they're saying. This is just to serve as an example. And based on my own research and experience in cap rate research, for lack of a better word, over the past few years, I feel that our cap rate is supportable at 4.7.
So in other words, you're just, I mean, it sounds like you're dismissing the brokerage firm brokerage reports.
Well, based on what I've seen, I put stock in what my conclusions are over what they've said their methodologies are.
Okay. And here you don't have actual anything in support of your estimated cap rates, correct?
We do in the form of rebuttal.
Oh, okay. Those would be my questions up to now. Thank you. Again, I do have rebuttal. I don't know at what point you want to hear that.
All right, first we'll deal with your main evidence, and then we'll go to your rebuttal and then the assessor's rebuttal after that. So, Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Thank you. In regards to the parking, you indicated there's 44 indoor parking and 161 outdoor parking spots. And the applicant's brief reflects that there's 194 outdoor spots. So just wanting to verify what the appropriate figure is.
We would have to review, I guess, the plans and the information. If there's a discrepancy, I can't comment on that right now without further review.
Okay, so that number is taken from the time when where does that number come from then for the assessors with regards to parking?
That would have
Frozen, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear us, Mr. Assessor?
Ms. Caulfield, can you, I don't know what's going on there.
I can't see anything. Oh, okay, we've lost. Do you want to take a break for a moment and we'll try to figure out what's going on?
Sure, let's recess for a few minutes while we get these technical issues. Oh,
Oh,
they're
there
back,
they are.
they're back. Let's not
Hi,
recess.
can you see and hear us? We lost you.
You're on, yeah.
Okay,
Okay. So you
Thanks.
did freeze for a bit, so
Yeah.
perhaps Mr. Navarro, I think you were asking questions? No, Gail was.
I
Ms.
was asked,
Anderson was asking questions. Maybe repeat your question and the assessor can repeat their answer.
okay, thanks. My question was regarding the parking, noted in the assessment presentation. Just wondering where the number comes from that's utilized for the parking, what record that comes from.
I mean, part of the request for information that we sent out to the building managers and owners is how many indoor and how many outdoor parking spots there are. So that's typically where we get that information from. But I wasn't part of putting this one on, so I can't comment for certain.
Okay.
But if there's a discrepancy, we can always review.
Okay, thanks very much. And what's the date when this property was added to the roll?
It looks like it was in June 2023.
Okay, thank you. And my other question relates to the number of buildings, just so that I have it clear in my mind. You indicated that there's 5 buildings. So there's 3 apartment complexes, the clubhouse, and then what's the 5th building?
We aren't quite sure at this time. We can look through that and get back to you if we can find the information.
Okay, okay. The indoor parking then, is it located under a building or it's not a separate building, right?
No, it'll be located underneath the building, I believe.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Colatruglio, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. And I have no questions either. So, Mr. Navarro, you may begin your presentation, please.
Okay, we are looking at 125 Maragate. And again, this is a 4-story low-rise apartment, 67 1-bedrooms, 72 2-bedrooms, and 22 3-bedrooms. If you turn to page 4, you can see an overhead shot. So the aerial photography hasn't caught up yet. There should be a complex there in the aerial photography, but there isn't. However, in the property description, we can see that again, this is a 4-story structure. This is the area is technically north of Garden City. I don't know if it's actually considered part of Garden City itself. And again, it has the number of suites that I mentioned, total of 161 suites. There are 44 indoor parking stalls and 194 surface parking stalls. There are also 12 EV charging stations, none of which are being used at this point. And it is located on 3.7 acres of land. The property was inspected January 11th, 2024. On page 5, you can see the general location of the property. You can see that they're actually, this is a little bit outside of the outer limits of development in the area. There are no bus routes or schools in this area. And on the picture below on page 5, you can see the general makeup of the complex. So there's one large complex, 2 smaller buildings, and then in the middle there is a clubhouse with a swimming pool. So officially there are 3 apartment buildings and an additional clubhouse. In terms of highest and best use, it's the current use as an apartment. And we can turn to page 8 for the approaches. So we're looking at this in several different ways. We're looking at it from per square foot basis. So on page 8, you can see some comparisons that we've used, basically scattered through most of the city. And we come up with a per square foot rent based on the unit size. So for 1 bedrooms, based on the comparisons that we've had, we are coming up with a per square foot rent of $175. You'll note that this is based on the unit size and not the overall gross area. So effectively, when we're calculating the square foot rate here, we're not taking into consideration the additional common areas. So this produces a rent on the 1 bedrooms of $11.76. For 2 bedrooms, we're getting a rent of $14.54, and for 3 bedrooms, a rent of $16.75. Again, $175 for the 1 bedrooms, $150 for 2 bedrooms, and $150 for the 3 bedrooms. In addition to this, we also took some comparisons from past briefs. And in particular, this one is actually from the sister property at 106 Lyra Gate, which is about 500 meters away. 500 meters away. So these are the comparisons that the assessor actually used in their evidence for 106 Lyra Gate. These all come from the area. These are all new buildings. They're all 4 stories. They're all wood framed. They're very comparable, and they come to a completely different conclusion. So the rents range between $14.59 and $12.97. The average is $13.84. That is actually extremely close to the average that we've put on this building. So when we look at the per square foot rate, and when we look at the averages based on comparisons in the area, we're coming out very close to where we are at, nowhere close to where the assessor is at. And again, these comparisons are, you can see they're between 650 meters and 7 kilometers. But again, they are that northwest side of the city. So everything north of Inkster Boulevard, east of King Edward, south of the Perimeter Highway, and west of Main Street. So if you look at that very, kind of northwest quadrant of the city, that is exactly where all of these are located. We've assigned a parking rate of $75 per stall per month, and $40, that is for the indoor parking stalls, and $40 per stall for the outdoor. The vacancy rate that we've applied is 4.2%, and the expense ratio that we've applied is 40.7. In terms of capitalization rates, we've gone with the standard 5.25. That is supported by the cap rate study that we've submitted, which I'm sure you've all seen at one point or another, including the assessors. So we've assigned a 5.25 capitalization rate to that. On page 11, you can see the workup. So we have a rent of $2,644,270, and I will just give you the quick calculation on what that is per suite per month. That is $1,369 per month per suite, based on the rent that we've estimated. And again, the average that we estimated based on the comparisons that we gave in there was $1,384. So we are very close to that. In terms of the expense ratio, we've applied an expense ratio of 40.7, slightly higher than what the assessor has given, and a net operating income of $1,577,591. Cap rate of 5.25. That gives them a value of $30,049,356, or $30,049,000. In the appendix, you can see the amount that was, you have on page 14 of the appendix, the assessor's valuation. On page 15, a list of the building amenities and suite amenities. On page 16 or 16 and 17, you have some of the layouts. And starting on page 18, you have some of the pictures of the property that I inspected. So you see some, there is really not much variation in terms of the suites anywhere. They are typical. So what you're looking at is a typical finish for basically all of the units inside. There is obviously a variance in terms of the suite counts, or the number of bedrooms. But in general, this is how they are all laid out. On page 24, you can see pictures of the outside. The bottom picture is adjacent to the clubhouse. You can see the fencing around the pool there, and you can see some of the EV charging stations that are scattered throughout the complex. Starting on page 25, you have the clubhouse. So it acts as a party room, guest room. There is a boardroom. There are stations for people that want to go and work there. You can see, obviously, you can play pool there. You can watch a movie. And at the very top, there is a gym. The last, picture 31 is the indoor parking lot. You can see on page 32 some of the, I believe this is fire. This is for the sprinkler system. Number 33 is their bobcat for clearing snow, and number 34 is the electrical panels. So individual metering on these. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. Tang, Mr. Barocas, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro?
Yes. On a per unit basis, what would you say buildings like this typically are in terms of a value per unit basis?
For the time frame of the reference date?
Yeah.
Well, if we look at really the only sale of this type of property is the one on McPhillips Street, and I believe that one sold for, I believe, $215 per door. It has less units. It only has 90 units compared to 161. So you would factor in some type of economies of scale there. I would say that you're probably looking at between 200 and 205,000 per door.
Okay. And then just looking at your valuation, you're coming out to 186,639 based on your workup. Does that seem a bit low to you? Or do you feel like a new building with these amenities, underground parking, gym, clubhouse, ought to be a bit higher on a per unit basis?
So the rent is what it is. I mean, obviously, the difference is in the capitalization rate. Now, Altus Group as a whole has supported the use of a 5.25 capitalization rate for newer apartments based on our interpretation of that sale at 2390 McPhillips Street. So we have a difference of opinion on that. We're at 5.25. What I gather is that you guys are around 5.75. So again, there's essentially a 50-point spread between our interpretations. Where we land, I don't know. But if you're asking me what the per door would be for this, based on the sale of 2390 McPhillips, this thing should be between 200 and 205,000 a door.
Okay. And let me see. Did you, when you did your determination for the average rents that you applied, did you make any upward adjustment to take into consideration the fact that this building is newer than all the comparable properties?
So I think there's a bit of a disconnect when you say this. When I look at the reference date, for me, what it does is it creates a before and an after. Okay, so this concept should be known to everyone when we're referring to the reference date. There's a before and there's an after. So what we're trying to do with this building is come up with a hypothetical value for it if it would have existed at the time of the reference date. Now we'll note that this property did not exist at that time. So we are effectively coming up with a hypothetical value for it. So had this building been there in 2021, April 2021, we can assume that it would have been built before that as well. So the rents that we have are relative to the market at that time. They are also in, I might just point this out, that this is probably going to be in your rebuttal, and it's going to be in my cap rate rebuttal as well. That the sale of 2390 McPhillips, again, you've supported that sale. You're saying that it is a legitimate sale based on a rent of $13.39 per suite at that point in time. So if you're supporting that rent at that time, then what I'm saying is that you guys are overestimating the rent on this based on the time frame of the reference date. And I will get further into that in the rebuttal that I have.
Okay. I guess we'll just have to wait and see about that. Those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colatruglio, do you have any questions?
I do. I'm just trying to understand the difference that we are seeing regarding the potential gross rents that you're using. Your position is, if I'm reading page 11 correctly, 2,644,270 versus the city's position at 3,078,893. It's quite a stark difference between the two positions. Can you help me understand why you are that far apart on that particular number?
It's my opinion that it's the factoring back of actual rents that has that effect. So the city is basically starting at a point way too high because of the methodology that they're using. Second, if you look at the comparables that the assessor is using, they're coming from completely different market regions. And as I understood from the assessor's comments to the previous applicant on that Taylor property, that there is a difference in terms of the location between McPhillips and Taylor. So there would be a difference in terms of the rents. And I mean, I'm not going to accuse anyone of anything, but it seems like we were just looking at the highest rents possible. Given that there are comparisons, good comparisons in the area for that time frame, why wouldn't you look at those?
But would those comparisons, now again, interesting that you say that, you're referring to your comps on page 9, are you?
That's correct.
Okay, and
those are all the same. I might just point out, they're from the same age brackets. They're wood frame construction. They're 4 stories.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really do. But again, it's not always, in a perfect world, we'd have 5 apartment blocks all jumbled into one area and we'd be able to see rents and sales, etc.
That's what we have.
Well,
Because if you're telling me that the ones that are in South Winnipeg are better comparisons, I'm gonna have to disagree with you there.
fair enough, and that's fair. I'm guessing I'm gonna ask the question then, with respect to these comps, do they have the mix of indoor parking? Do they have the clubhouse scenario? Do they have a pool scenario compared to the subject property? I
don't believe any of the comparisons on both sides has that.
Fair enough.
That said, some of that will be in the rebuttal.
Okay, now, would you not think that having those types of amenities may in fact push the rents a little higher? It may help to explain the difference between the rent that you are using ultimately and what the assessor is using ultimately?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think what's happening here is there are rents that are being used which aren't taking into consideration, first of all, the changes in the marketplace from after April 1, 2021. And I don't know what adjustments are being applied to those rents because I'm not privy to that information. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with even talking about the use of rents that are coming after the reference date, because they cause a whole bunch of different problems. And the biggest one is that there's no agreement on how to adjust them.
So, and along that vein, what did you use as a percentage to work your number back from the post reference to?
I indicate that in my rebuttal. I don't use that methodology.
Okay.
I used market comparisons. And from these comparisons, what I can say is that they're all good quality buildings. They don't have the amenities that our building does have. But at the same time, that is, again, that is only going to cause a slight difference in terms of the rents overall.
Fair enough. And then moving on to the cap rate, again, we see a very a gap of 0.5% between where the city is at and where you are at. You're feeling this is a riskier investment for some reason, and why do you feel that that would be necessary to have a cap rate of 5.25 in a newer scenario like we have?
Well, first of all, we don't actually agree with the interpretation of the city in terms of the calculation of cap rate for 2390. So again, we're starting at a different point altogether.
Ultimately, we have 2 different positions.
Absolutely. If I was looking at the cap rates for this type of property to begin with, I would be starting at 5%. I wouldn't be starting at 4.75. So there's that initial disagreement. Now, is there less risk in this type of property? It's a bigger property. It's in a newer area. It's not new to anything. There's no services there in terms of schools, in terms of bus service. So you're going to have to wait a while before this thing starts performing better until that development catches up to it. Second of all, I mean, even a small thing like EV stations and stuff like that, those costs add up, especially when nobody's buying EVs and using them. And that's what our owner has reported to us, is that from the day that they opened up, nobody has asked to use those. In terms of the amenities, I think what the amenities are intended to do is attract these people, attract a certain demographic, and allow them to use these services as a way of, you know, kind of bringing them in. It may do so in terms of the vacancy rate. I mean, it's not very low. It's the vacancy rate is very low. But I think what we're talking about here in terms of differences amount to where the starting point is on the cap rate and what the rents are and how to apply those rents properly. Again, I'm gonna say that for the factor back, there's just no agreement on that, and I don't think we should be
Fair
even entertaining it.
And we may see more information come as a result of the rebuttal information from both sides at that point. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Colatruglio. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
Thank you. In regards to the parking that you've utilized, the parking per stall fee per month of $75 for indoor and $40 for outdoor, just wondering the rationale around that. Is that where is that based on?
That's coming to us from the owners, including the counts.
Okay. Thank you. And my next question is the property fully occupied, or is there a vacancy at this time?
I believe there is vacancy now, but that is post, again, that's post reference, so it wouldn't be relative.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. And I do not have questions. So, Mr. Navarro, I understood you to say you do have rebuttal evidence?
I do.
Okay.
So this would be the first document noted as rebuttal. So in our rebuttal, we've included a public document, which is the board decision for 106 Lara Gate, which is essentially 550 meters away from the subject. On page 6, you can see their general location. One is, the lower one is Marrogate, the upper one is Lara Gate. That's how close these two are. They're developed by the same company. They're developed in absolutely the same way. The only difference between the two is that Lara Gate has, I believe, 175 units as opposed to 161. In terms of the pictures and layouts, you can see the differences. There really aren't that much in terms of difference. And the rents that, again, I said were included in my brief, I got out of the assessor's comparisons for 106 Lara Gate. These came from the assessor. On page 9, you can see the assessor's rent comparison, comparable number 4. The assessor is saying that there is a rent there of $16.95. We've calculated the rent at $16.55. And again, that is our interpretation of it. But we've also included the information for it and how we came to our conclusion. On page 10, we come to a different conclusion too. 1467 is what the assessor is saying for their comparable one at 701 Sterling Line Parkway. We're coming to a rent of 1434. On page 11, this issue of the factored back rents has come up time and time again. So we've delved a little bit into this factored back rent and how to factor back. What I was saying to Mr. Colatruglio was that there is no agreed to methodology for factoring these rents back. In our opinion, you can't use RTB guidelines because these buildings are not subject to RTB guidelines. So we use the average year of construction for 2005 plus. This is coming from CMHC. So this is the increases in rents based on suite type for the time frame of the comparisons for the subject. So we need to adjust for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So we've laid out the methodology of how we would have factored them back. And then we also looked at the comparisons themselves, which are the rent roll for that time, which was submitted to the owner. Now we came to a rent of $1591.77 unfactored. The assessor is at $1595, I believe. In our opinion, that difference is caused just by the adjustment on the rent for 2 vacant units that were in the rent roll. In our opinion, the assessor hasn't actually factored the rents back because there's no indication from our review of it that it's been factored back. So I don't understand that methodology or even looking at it. What we should be looking at is the time frame, and that is where if we make proper adjustments based on, for example, what we've used is CMHC guidelines. We came to a rent of $1460.93 factored back. That's different than $1595. On top of that, we also looked at one other factor, and that is there on page 16 and 17, you'll see the RTB guidelines. These properties are not subject to RTB guidelines, so that can't be used. And on page 18, this is probably one thing that I'd like to go over with some so if you recall, I made a comment earlier about how there is the before and the after. So what we're trying to come up with is a value for a property that didn't exist as of the reference date. And part of the problem in coming back with factored back rents is that they're looking at construction that started after the reference date. Now, what's on the on page 18 of the rebuttal there is a change in the cost of construction for apartment buildings. The top one is low rise and the bottom one is high rise. So you can see the chart at the very right-hand corner, building construction price indices. And you can see the change from 2021 to 2023. It's going from 135 to 154. That is about a 15% increase, I believe, in terms of construction prices after the reference date. So if you're not adjusting for that change in construction values during that time frame, you've overshot the market before the reference date. So this is why I caution the use of certain information for after the reference date. The construction information is clearly showing that the prices are rising very quickly after the reference date. So we have to imagine that our building, our hypothetical building, exists as of April 1, 2021. So that is an important factor that I don't think is being looked at. You're not just accounting for changes in rent, you're also accounting for changes in construction at the time after the reference date. And if you're not making, or you're not conscious of that, you will overshoot the market. Lastly, on page 20 is this is from the city assessment site. This is the multi-family market regions. The reason we have these market regions is because there are differences in the market, even within Winnipeg. So our subject lies within market region 3. The comparisons that the assessor used all came from market region 11 and market region 10. So again, I believe that we could have used comparisons that were closer to the subject and come to, the conclusion that we were speaking about between the assessor and myself, but what the door price would have been for a building of this type. And I said probably between 200 and 205,000. That's my rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. Tang, Mr. Brokus, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence?
Yeah, on page 12, you show the rent roll. Just to confirm, this is the Mira Gate rent roll.
Correct.
So when I'm looking at the factoring back, it looks like you factored back the rent, but I don't see any of the parking charges here. Is that something you would take into consider, investor would take into consideration?
Well, I mean, from our perspective, the parking charges would have been fairly static. So I don't think there would have been as much of a need to factor those back.
Okay, I mean, like, but if we're looking at like an income per unit basis, if you got 161 indoor parking spots and they're about $150 a month to rent, and you multiply that by 12 months, that's 289,800 in potential income that's unaccounted for. Do you think that ought to be considered?
So what we're trying to do with that chart is simply isolate the factor back rents for the units themselves, not the parking. So in the model itself, or sorry, in the valuation, we actually do include parking, I believe.
Sorry, and you had potential parking at 111.59. What was the
127, 146.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that was the vacancy. My apologies. So what rate did you assign to the parking per month for indoor?
75.
Is that typical for indoor parking?
Again, you have to caution. I'm going to caution you on that. That is full occupancy of parking. Not everybody is renting a parking spot inside. And from what I know of my inspection with the owner, is that the indoor parking stalls have not been fully leased up. In fact, they're mostly empty.
Okay.
But again, that is post-reference information.
Okay, I'm just making sure that you're taking into consider all income sources, not just the rents they're stating. Do you think, given its location, most tenants would have a vehicle, given there aren't the bus services?
I would say that most are probably renting a parking spot. There is a lot of parking in this location, and I mean, if you look at the number of stalls there, it's you could have units with more than one vehicle, but not all of it is rented out.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Colatruglio, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Brokus and Ms. Tang, I understand that you also indicated you have rebuttal.
Yes. It's
Okay.
the same one as we presented last time, but it's an applicant, so I'll keep
Okay,
it
but yeah, let's just get to it first.
for sure.
And you can give us the
Yeah,
presentation. Okay, go ahead.
same thing. So Altus submits a cap rate study where 2390 McPhillips is featured, so it is applicable in this regard. So again, I know everyone's sitting around talking today has seen this property and seen my work up before, but it's just to reiterate that based on the information prior to the reference date, we're at 471 on it. And again, the location of this property, it's in a much busier location.
Excuse me one moment, Madam Chair.
Yes.
The applicant has not yet gotten his,
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
we'll just give a minute then.
Waiting for my email to update.
oh,
You're in trouble now.
Connected.
do you have it?
Should be, yeah. Sally, yeah.
There we go.
Okay, I have it.
Okay. So again, Marcelo's seen this more than once. It's basically just my calculations to confirm 471 for McPhillips. McPhillips is in the Altus cap rate study that wasn't presented, but we've seen before. I just want to provide the data that I used to stand on the cap rate. The model cap rate's 475. This one is 471. They're in the north. This one's got a multi-purpose room, exercise room. Doesn't look like it has a clubhouse. It's behind Jim Gauthier near Walmart. The subject property is more towards the outskirts of the city. So I feel, without going on for too long, the model cap rate at 475 is pretty solid. That's my rebuttal evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Navarro?
Actually, I have rebuttal to that rebuttal.
Okay,
So
let's finish the questions here.
no, I don't have any questions. I think it should probably be addressed in the rebuttal. I've seen this presentation a few times, so I'm okay with what Mr. Brokus has said up to this point.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Colatruglio?
I'm good, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we have another piece of rebuttal evidence arising from the rebuttal evidence.
Yeah.
So is that in our folders?
It is
Ms.
not
Coppell?
yet. I was
Okay.
not certain that it would be distributed, so give me one moment, please. Okay, you should have it, Mr. Colatruglio. The panel should have it. I am attaching it to an email for the assessors right now.
What name is it under?
Rebuttal of assessor capitalization rate.
Nope, that was the name that you gave
Oh,
it.
it's under 125 Merrick.
Item 6, applicant rebuttal to A&T cap rate.
Okay,
Yeah,
is it 98 pages long?
Yeah, that would be it.
Okay,
Got it.
all right.
Thank you.
Just make sure everybody has it before we start.
not yet. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, one moment, please. I apologize. The email is very slow. Have the assessors received it?
Not as of yet.
According to this, you should have received it.
Yeah, we got it.
Thank you for your patience.
Good to go?
Okay, I think you're good to go.
Okay, so this is rebuttal of rebuttal. So Mr. Barocas's rebuttal indicated that there was a difference in terms of the interpretation of how the rents should be adjusted on the capitalization rate. And let's be clear, we're talking about 2390 McPhillips Street. This is the one property that seems to still be the thorn on everyone's side. So what is the proper methodology for adjusting or calculating the cap rate? Now, Mr. Barocas has adjusted it according to his view, and that is, again, there are some differences in terms of the way he stabilized the income on the gross rents and then the expenses. So he came to a different conclusion than Mr. DuPont, who calculated those cap rates for Altus Group on his side. On our side for Altus Group. So Mr. DuPont's point was in the evidence that Mr. Barocas has put into his rebuttal is that the adjustments, there should have been some adjustment on the rent for the units at 2390 McPhillips. In our opinion, these rents were slightly lower than market rents. So that is his reasoning for adjusting them. So he adjusted the rents upward based on the fact that these rents were below market. Why are they below market though is the question. Why are they below market? Why would anyone charge rents below market? I think that actually has to do with the project side of it more so than the rent conclusions that were drawn from the market analysis that would have been presented to any type of lender. So I am just going to briefly dive into this and give you an explanation of what I think has happened. So 2390 McPhillips Street was severed from a parent roll known as 2400 McPhillips Street. And if you look at page page 1 through 19. You can see the actual zoning application that severed and created these two parcels. On page 19, in fact, you can see the new lot, which is lot 2, where our subject is 2390 McPhillips, and lot 1, which remained a commercial parcel. So the property owner basically applied to rezone this property and then sever it and created lot 2 on page 19. What we don't get into is who owned that property. So both of these properties, the before and the after the severing, were owned by Ranjoy Sales and Leasing Limited. And on page 23 of the handout, you can see that up top it says 2400 McPhillips Street is owned by Ranjoy Sales and Leasing. And at the bottom, 2390 McPhillips Street is owned by Ranjoy Sales and Leasing. On page 24, you can see the titles. This is the first one is title 2708409. That is on page 24. That is 2400 McPhillips Street. That is owned by Ranjoy Sales and Leasing. And then on page 29, you can see title 2708410. That is 2390 McPhillips, also owned by Ranjoy Sales and Leasing. On page 32, you can actually see the originating, sorry, on page 33, you can see the originating instruments. And you can see from the district register to Ranjoy Sales and Leasing. So the district register is basically land titles. So all that's saying is that this is basically a transaction where Ranjoy is still the owner of this parcel of land that was basically divided from a piece of land that was owned by Ranjoy Sales and Leasing. What this says is it's basically the developer of this apartment building was the same person who owned the land, meaning that there was no land acquisition costs. Okay. Now, land acquisition costs are, I'll get into that in a few seconds. But you can also see, if you turn back to page 27. At the very top, you see a mortgage. And that mortgage pertains to 2400 McPhillips Street, okay?
What page you on?
Sorry,
Mortgage that you're talking about,
yeah, 27,
page 27?
yeah, at the very top. See it?
No, I don't actually.
I think I have it on page 31. It's 95 million.
Oh, you're doing by PDF numbers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are numbers on the left-hand bottom half, the left.
Okay,
Yeah, that'll tell you where we're at.
okay,
Okay,
we'll get there.
yeah. So that shows a mortgage there for 2400 McPhillips Street.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, if you go to the 2390 McPhillips Street, apart from saying that it originated from the same owner, there's actually no mortgage document on this property. Which makes it not a stereotypical sale, not a stereotypical development where you would typically see a mortgage, where you would typically see a land transaction. None of those are present. And what we know of is that that parcel of land was owned by Ranjoy Sales and Leasing, and I'll just come out and say Ranjoy Sales and Leasing is Jim Gauthier. Jim Gauthier developed this property. And one of the things that he didn't have to deal with was the acquisition of land, which is a huge expense. Starting on page 34, I don't know what number that is for you. It might be 3 after, it might be page 37.
What are you pointing at?
That's where I get into this area of how are these properties financed, okay? So basically the way that they're financed is typically there's debt and equity financing, and what they're financing is the soft costs, the hard costs, and the land acquisition costs. That's typical for most developments. And I think most people have probably run into these hard costs, soft costs, and land acquisition. Now, if we look at page 39, there are some pro forma examples, and I'll just note, I'll be very, open about this, that this is an example coming from the University of, I believe, Southern California. It's a very generalized approach to it. However, it is very applicable to our situation here in Manitoba because it's done no differently. What they're estimating is that the land acquisition costs of an overall project ranges between 10 and 20% of the overall cost of the project. So right off the bat, this project is going to cost anywhere from 10 to 20% less than what a typical developer would pay for it. And those costs would be reflected in the amount of money that you would need to finance a project like this. If you're paying for land acquisition, you're going to have to pay more. If land isn't even a consideration in the development of the property, you can apply rents that are slightly lower, which I think is one of the reasons the rents may have been lower to start off with, and then they gradually started raising them. However, getting back to a starting point, the starting point is that these rents would have been slightly lower to begin with at the very beginning and then started going up. Now, that may seem like a bit of a stretch, but when we look at it from the pro forma perspective of this property itself, if we turn to page 53, and I'll note that this is an earlier example of Mr. Barocas's work in terms of calculating the cap rate for this property. So I'm not sure if he updated his methodology. I have an earlier version where he came to a 4.79% cap rate, which is slightly different. So you'll note on page 53, this is the assessor's workup for the sale of 2390 McPhillips Street. And the stabilized income that he's come up with is $1,445,870. Okay. Now that is, I assume, based on the 2019 performance of $1,445,870. Now, the pro forma amount, this is the amount taken from the sales brochure supplied by, I believe, the agency that sold this property. It's included in the cap rate study of Altus Group that we supplied. The pro forma is actually saying, or we're saying, 1,461,324. We're working it backwards. The net operating income is 978,669. I believe you dealt with the previous applicant also on this very same information. We see a difference of basically, I don't know, $16,000 in terms of the stabilized that the assessor has come up with and what Altus pro forma is saying. Now at 1,461,324, which is what Altus is saying, and the Altus pro forma, we're at 5%. And that is basically just a 1% difference. Getting back to the argument of land, if your costs are that much lower for land, just a 1% difference on rents will take you above 5% on the cap rate. That's what it comes down to. So a simple slight change in terms of the rents will simply take you above 5%. And this is what we're trying to say, that this was not an atypical sale. There were other things to consider in this sale that were maybe not known to the assessor, but probably should have been looked at in terms of adjusting those rents. Now, Mr. DuPont, in my opinion, adjusted the rents correctly. Maybe I'm not 100% sure of whether they were that high, but he has adjusted rents for a specific reason. And we think that the capitalization rate for this property is actually above 5%. And we think that the information that we've supplied here is actually supporting that. The last bit of information pertains to properties that were included in Mr. Barocas's and Altus's cap rate studies, which I don't think are relevant. At the very last part of this, on pages, I don't even know it. I believe it's after page 84. You'll see an article from the Free Press regarding the development of this property, and you can see the Gauthier family was involved. They indicate in the article that they had this land, which they built this property on. And we think that it probably played a part in bringing down those rents when this building was developed. So that's our position, is that the rents for this property and for this sale probably should have been looked at in terms of their relativity to the market. And we're not sure that that was actually done. So that's where I'm at. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Barocas, Ms. Tang, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro on the rebuttal to the rebuttal?
Yeah. I'm not sure. Like, I mean, this is the first time I'm seeing this. Why would a for-profit developer reduce the rents and take less profit because of some sort of consideration in terms of, I think it was the land development cost? You said, like, why would they take anything less than what they could get?
I don't think that that's actually the question you should be asking. I think the question should actually be, why would their rents be lower at that time? And I think the point is that because they didn't have to incur this type of development cost, they were able to set the rents slightly lower than market. Now, why would they? Well, first of all, they weren't in the business of developing properties like this. And the article from the Free Press actually gets into that they weren't in the business of building apartment buildings. Jim Gauthier was not in this business. Second of all, it's also clear that I lost my train of thought. So they didn't have to incur those costs in terms of developing this property like a typical developer would. Second of all, you can see that the building was leased up right away. There was absolutely no vacancy in it, and that was probably the opportune. I mean, the rents that sell themselves, which were, you know, again, as we're saying, lower than market.
So in your opinion, you don't think Jim Gauthier, who car dealership businessman, wouldn't have enlisted real estate professionals, appraisers, agents in coming up with the rent? He would have set it lower because he just didn't know better?
That's not what we're saying. They would have had to go through some type of development process just like anyone else would. What we're saying is that they had an advantage over most competitors. And they were able to lease up everything quickly because they could charge slightly less on their rents. That's what we're saying.
So leading up to the sale, the potential rent just by the income and expense mailer for 2019, just to be clear, was $1,445,870.
That's right. Yeah, that produces
Those
a
are
per
my-
unit cost of 215,000.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barocas. Mr. Colatruglio, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro?
I'm just, having a hard time understanding that, Mr. Navarro, you seem to feel that the Goche, when he developed this into an apartment block, he obviously had some land costs that were associated probably long before this apartment complex was set up. And then he divided up for whatever purposes afterwards. So he did have land costs.
I'm sure there would have been some
And
cost.
certainly
in
would have
rezoning
been,
it.
yeah, and well, not just the cost of rezoning, but cost of the original land, whether he bought that land 5 years before, or 25 years before, irrelevant at that point. But he still had land costs. And to say that he's having an advantage, it's no different than any other developer in the city who
Well,
buys a parcel of land and sits on it for 20 years and then develops it. There's still cost to holding that land. Initial
Yeah.
cost and holding costs through the years. So I'm not buying into the argument that somehow or other he was able to do it at a lower rate. Certainly in the article, they talk about what a great location it is, which I happen to agree with. Based on the fact that literally you could walk out your door, go to a Walmart or catch a bus there, or go to McPhillips and do a myriad of things in a half-mile radius, as it were. So,
it's a great location.
yeah,
Absolutely. What I'll also say about that, though, is that it sold for 250,000 a door. And it's 90 units.
fair enough. And I'm not arguing that point of it. I'm just saying that I don't think I buy into the argument of the lesser amount somehow an advantage on the land part of the equation.
Well,
And I mean, ultimately,
yeah,
the other part of it is when we're looking at the subject property that we ultimately are trying to equate to here. The subject seems to have a lot more amenities than what we're looking at 2390 McPhillips. So we're not necessarily, it's not the perfect apple to the perfect apple, as it were.
no, I mean, I would say, like, from what I know of these two projects is that 2390 McPhillips has very nice finishes, very nice suites. It's got the ideal location. In some sense, it doesn't need those additional amenities. However, it's also geared to 55 plus people. So maybe some of the play stuff is not necessary for that location. However, the costs of building the amenities into that building are not that significant, in my opinion. There are some costs to it, but the real costs are in the development of the project overall, which you have land acquisition costs in that.
Fair enough. Those are my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. They've been asked and answered. Thanks.
Thank you, and I have no questions either. So having said that, Mr. Barocas, Ms. Tang, would you like to do a summation?
I mean, I think a lot of it has been said. So I think we'll just leave it in the panel's hands. I think the panel has a good understanding in regards to the subject property, its relative amenities. That's good. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro?
I think what we'll say is that in terms of the rent comparisons that we have, they're likely better comparisons than what we have from the assessor. Show they're more relative to the location of the property. In terms of the suite mix and the cost per suite, we've come in below the sale of 2390 in terms of per door. But again, that's you have to factor in economies of scale into this. So this is a larger complex. The cost per door would come down because of the size of the property. So we think that we've given a fair representation in terms of the rent. And again, we have a difference of opinion on the cap rate.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate and thank you for both of your presentations today. And so now we have heard all items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you very much.